So maybe one last question.
John Price is my name. I wear a couple of hats as well, but one of them is the immediate past chair of the Australian Information Industry Association and Cheryl's colleague. One thing that I'd like to address across the whole panel is a phenomenon that's certainly happening in Australia, and that is that a lot of the product companies in Australia has a significant number of small software development companies developing product, and that product is aimed at the global marketplace. But capital capability is one limitation, and secondly, time to market for niche products that may be usurped by larger organisations at a later stage is a key issue. So what we're starting to see is a trend of partnering with Indian companies who can bring to bear the software development faster and therefore allow that product to get to market faster. And I'd be interested to have the panel make a comment about their perspective across other geographies.
Yeah, so one of the things, and it's a great question that you bring up, is there are two parts to it. One is how do you get your product done cheaper and faster to market. But the second and more interesting thing is that CIOs in the U.S. especially are starting to now trust a lot of the Indian systems integrators, the Indian offshore services providers. And so there's this whole debate in the U.S. is your next trusted advisor in the IT business going to be an Indian company? And so they help you not only build the product, but take the product to market as well. And I know several companies in Silicon Valley who formed partnerships with TCS and Infosys and Wipro and really are using that ability to go to market. They're also finding that these companies are easier to deal with than maybe some of the larger SIs. Also, in the new model, I mean, you want cheaper SIs. And let's face it, some of the American-based SIs are now coming down in cost, but that's because of the arbitrage they're doing in India. So they're catching up. But I think that's a very interesting thing that I see a lot of new companies have actually done that, and it's worked very well so far. And I think that may be the wave of the future.
Any other comments? So with that, I'd like to end with two short stories to sum this up. First is, way back in 2001, I did a startup in New Jersey, and this was a wireless infrastructure startup, but we're going to sell first in Europe. So we started raising money, guess where? First in New Jersey and then in the Boston area. We would go to a VC and say, you know what, we're going to sell first in Europe. They said, oh, you mean you'll sell in the US and in Europe? He said, no, we're going to sell first in Europe. If you're successful there, we'll come back to the US. They said, oh, sorry, not interested. We haven't done a deal like this before. Now, if you now fast forward, and eventually, to solve that problem, we ended up lining a European VC investor first before we got the US investor. Now you go and take this proposition to a VC, and you can bet you won't get that same reaction. We've come a long way in the last 5 years. Then, we got funded. We had our first Series A, $6 million and ready to go. We got to spend that money. So we needed an accounting system. So instead of going down the line and getting QuickBooks, which was a traditional thing to do, somebody came knocking and said, you know what, I have a virtual accountant. I don't know if you've heard of that company. They had a very novel offering, which is what MR described as BPO 2.0. You ship your stuff to them. Now, in this case, it was shipped to Columbia, South Carolina, very small place, low cost. And they had tied up with a heavy-duty accounting system called Lawson and added what today would be called a mashup, a layer on top of it to make it usable over the web. So here was a small company called Virtual Accountant partnering right from day one. Now, in retrospect, had they tied up with somebody in Philippines or somebody in India to do the back-end work, they would have been enormously competitive over the traditional way of doing things. And more people like my startup would have signed up, and perhaps they would have been around even today. So the point that I want to make here is that this new world that I think is being painted here of modular firms, which are going to assemble capabilities from an ecosystem, which may or may not be local, to service global clients, is here today. So in that context, I think it is really important that you think of going global right from day one. You think in terms of building a modular organization right from day one. And heavens forbid, if Bollywood can do their premiere in Canada, there's no reason why Bollywood is the quintessential local product, right? Yeah. And if they are seriously thinking of going global as they are, and are picky and choosy about where they launch their product for global markets first, you as a startup or an emerging company should be thinking along those lines for sure. So with that, I'd like to thank all the panel members today.